You talk a little about the intersectionality between being young and black as a professor. So, what was your experience like being a young professor?
Crazy. Um, so I mentioned my first teaching position was in rural Virginia. So it was a town that, again, people drove around in pickup trucks and had Confederate flags on them. Um, so it was very much a college town. So that if you weren't a part of the, folks that drove around in pickup trucks, you were probably a part of the university. So the challenge of that was that there was really nowhere to go socially for a young professional that students didn't go. So it's not like I could just go to bars in that area because that's where the students went. So I was, mid 20s, and it was crazy because the students weren't significantly younger than me. And they knew that. I mean, they could see that. So for some of them, I'll say even particularly for the white males, um, they just couldn't wrap their minds around me knowing more than them. So they would challenge me a lot. Like I had students challenge me quite a bit. I had a student in my class, a public speaking class, and he used to sit in the not in the first row, but he was like in the middle row, in the middle of that row. So it was almost like he was in the middle of the room. And he used to sit there with his arms folded the entire class. He had this buzz cut. He looked like military. And just stare. Like typically he didn't contribute to the class conversation unless I specifically called on him, which I often did just to break that look on his face and force him to speak. But he would just look at me with this scowl on his face. Like, who is she? Like, why is she here? Another semester, I had a group of frat brothers. They were all, of course, taller than me, so they're bigger in stature. And they would all sit together on the front row and just ask me dumb questions, like just to kind of stump me. So they would ask me something dumb that I had to kind of figure out how to answer. So there was just a lot of challenges that they would purposely throw at me to try to throw me off my game. The white females often would write on their teacher evaluations, class evaluations, that I was intimidating. So for a lot of them, it was an intimidation factor. And and then if I'm being honest, when it came to the handful, because I didn't have many, but the handful of black male students I had in class, then it was another thing. It was kind of like, I wonder if she dates students. So then, there was a little bit of that in the beginning. That doesn't happen now. Now I'm their mom. But back in the day, it was like, yeah, I did have a couple try to be sneaky. I found a rose on my desk every now and then, and oh yeah.
Wow.
So yeah, in fact, I befriended a student. He was a football player. After he was out of my class, he came to help me move something in my apartment one day. And the apartment complex that I lived in, there were several professors that lived in that complex. And somebody saw him kind of leave my apartment to like throw something away, or doing something he was helping me with. So then it was, it's kind of a mini scandal for a little while, but it was, luckily he was getting ready to graduate, so he was out of there. But,
Wow.
there was always kind of that question of, whether I would, it almost felt like my colleagues also were questioning whether I would cross a line because they seemed to have an odd interest in my dating life. So they would ask me questions, inappropriate questions when I think about it now. Like, did I date outside of my race? I mean, it was this weird thing in my department as the only black female, and I'm pretty sure I was one of the youngest faculty there, that they would ask me questions about stuff like that. Very inappropriate thinking back on it.
Yeah, I would think that any question about your personal dating life would be inappropriate, but wow.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And I remember one of the older white male professors straight out asking me once if I dated outside my race. And I don't know why that was important or relevant.
Right, the nerve.
But he flat out asked me that.
Wow. So I think he was trying to like hook you up with somebody he knew or checking to see like if you might cross the boundary and date a student.
Right.
Wow.
I think he was trying to hook me up with somebody. But, you know, again, why? Like, why are you? So, yeah, it was, and it, things like that are the kinds of things that I would like to weave into our show because there, a lot of it is, it's, you know, it's funny thinking back on it now, how just weird and inappropriate it was.
Yeah, that's very unusual. Yeah.
Exactly.
It's almost like you can't write that stuff.
Exactly.
Right.
And so those experiences, you know, definitely helped me to write a character going through that kind of thing. You know, which I imagine will be even more interesting today because there's social media and stuff like when I was going through this in the 90s, you know, there wasn't all of that. So, but I can only imagine how much more complicated that would make it. What about you? I don't know. You came along several years after.
Yeah, so. And that's you know
maybe
just
you did have social media. I don't know.
Well, we did. You know, I definitely was an adult during the you know big social media moment. You know the saying, "Black don't crack," right? I remember my grandmother came up to see one of my performances when I was in school, and I introduced her to one of my faculty members, the only black faculty member, and I said, "This is my grandmother." And he goes, "Your grandmother?" I go, "Yeah, my grandmother." He goes, "Well, as they say, black don't crack." Right? And you know, I say that to say that being 28, as you know, in my first tenure track faculty position, it was very confusing, not just to students, but also to other faculty members. You know, that yes, I have to keep my card on me because yes, I am a faculty member.
Right, yeah,
you know,
yeah.
And it was very not jarring, but surprising. People would second guess. You know, when I would go to get my faculty discount on my coffee, they would go, "Oh, we need to see your ID." Right. After you know, another faculty member just you know got a coffee at a discount and didn't have to show an ID. You know.
Right.
I mean, I was flattered by it, and I like to think that someday it will end, and I'll be very disappointed.
It will. Nobody asks me for my card anymore.
So, you know, that's kind of, that's my current burden. You know, it still happens now that I often get confused of being a student. So during the whole pandemic lockdown, I went to my office to pick up some books, and I had to have a police officer let me in because all the buildings were locked. And they were like, "Well, what are you coming here for?" And I go, "I'm going to my office." "To your office? The administration buildings are that way," assuming that I was a part of resident life, right? Maybe I was an RA or something. And I go, "No, the faculty offices are over here. I'm going to my office to go pick up some of my books so that I can teach my classes this fall." Hint, hint. So let me in so I can go to my office, you know?
Right.
And just the look on his face was like, "You're a faculty member?" You know? Which is why I wear my beard now. It gives me a few more years. People used to say I was a kid posing as a professor. Being a young professor during a social media age, you can go online and see what students are saying about you. And it was interesting, you know, it's not ye old 50s student who might slip you a note or give you a look. You know, they were saying some pretty racy things, you know, like, I'm not going to say everything that they were saying,
hot
but
tamale thing already. My professor,
exactly,
I think they stopped doing that.
exactly. Like, ooh, he wears tight pants, or he's hot. Like, take his class. He's smart, but it doesn't hurt that he's hot AF. And I was like, what is AF? Oh,
right.
So. Yeah, there was a lot of that. And then I was surprised that it wasn't just online. It was showing up in my teaching evaluations. And I went, oh man, is this going to be a problem? Are they going to think that I'm like making an effort to be inappropriate in class or something like that?
Yeah.
So I found that it early on, I was sort of relaxed a bit, but it affected how I communicated with students because I wanted to make a clear divide that like, I am not your friend, I'm not your peer, even though you might be older than me. I'm definitely, this is a professional relationship. So I can be more personable now because I'm not as nervous about them being confused about that boundary.
It's interesting that you say that because when I was, in my, trying to remember if it was a master's program or my PhD program, where we had a orientation among the TAs. Well, it was more of a discussion, but talking about that boundary and that line that you have to create and one of the things they talked about that was dressing professionally and the importance of that. And what I found was that I've worked at several different predominantly white universities where a lot of the white professors, like they didn't really dress up necessarily. And so I was always taken aback by that because for us, it was stressed that, you guys really need to dress it up because that's a part of what's going to create that boundary, especially if you're young. You really need to come in there looking like I'm the professional, I'm the professor in order to kind of demonstrate that or delineate the fact that, all right, I'm not just, I literally, and I don't think to this day I've ever worn jeans to class. Just because I always had that in my mind. And now, like I said, now I can be most of my students' mom. When they talk about the things oh, my mom does that. Or my mom's like, I'm that age, right? But I still can't imagine going to class, like dressed down. Because of the fact that I always learned from being a young professor that you need to, something needs to show that you are the professor and they're the students.
Yeah. That actually is pretty tricky in theater because appropriate professional dress sometimes is dressing down because I can't teach a voice and movement class with a blazer on.
Right.
Do you know what I mean? So you have to dress appropriately. And like you said, you take your cues from the other professors. You get these older white male professors and they've got on t-shirts and whatever, and you go, okay, I guess that's what the professional attire expectation is. But like you said, being young, you have to take a different cue. Yeah. I don't know. I do wear jeans to class, but usually with professional shoes and a blazer if I feel like it.
Yeah.
I think bringing my kid in every now and then and talking about my wife helps a bit.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Well, me, whenever I mention the '90s, they're like, "Oh yeah, she's my mom. She's my mom's age." But yeah, I think it just stuck because of the fact that, I had to be really aware of that in the beginning. In the early days, I had to really think about, making sure those boundaries are there because, and plus, I just, I didn't want to get in any trouble. Like, I can't be too cozy with my students because that's going to get me in a, compromising situation with the administration, and I didn't want to do that either. So, I was definitely always aware of that. If this is a show you'd want to see,
support us by following, liking, and subscribing to Teaching While Black TV.
Because Black content matters.